6:45. This is the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. The news edited by Danushka Madavala, read by Soundithavam. The Prime Minister calls on all parties to come together to ensure the country's recovery. An accelerated program has been implemented to solve the domestic gas problem. An interim budget for the year 2022 will be tabled in Parliament this August. Sri Lanka to organise credit aid conference with 3 main lending countries. India's Finance Minister assures fullest support for Sri Lanka's economic recovery. Electric vehicle import permit scheme for Sri Lankan foreign workers. In news overseas, the Taliban appeal for international aid after deadly quake. Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe addressing Parliament yesterday called on all parties to come together for the country's recovery from the catastrophic economic situation. The Premier cautioning the lawmakers that Sri Lanka is now facing a far more serious situation beyond the mere shortages of fuel, gas, electricity and food, said the economy has faced a complete collapse and the crisis can only be resolved through reviving the economy, first by resolving the foreign reserves issue. The Premier also called on the country's citizens to contribute to the efforts to rebuild the country from the abyss it has fallen into today. Prime Minister Wickremesinghe said an accelerated program has been implemented to solve the domestic gas problem. He said steps have been taken to import 100,000 metric tons of gas. It will resolve the domestic gas issue island-wide. The World Bank has contributed $70 million and the government $20 million for this purpose. The Prime Minister said efforts have been made to get maximum quantities of fuel. Mr. Wickremesinghe says an interim budget for the year 2022 will be tabled in Parliament this August in order to create the foundation for the path ahead. The Premier also revealed that the budget for the year 2023 is expected to be presented in November 2022. Speaking further, he expressed gratitude to all political parties and intellectuals taking part in these discussions to support the nation-building efforts. The Prime Minister also noted that the government is working towards ensuring food security and introducing political reforms. Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe says a staff-level agreement with the International Monetary Fund and the programme for a bailout package will be finalised by the end of July. The first in-person talks with the IMF on Sri Lanka's bailout request commenced in Colombo on Monday and is going on for 10 days. Prime Minister Wickremesinghe met with the visiting IMF delegates who arrived in the island for talks on a bailout programme. He added that Sri Lanka has concluded the initial discussions with the IMF delegation and exchanged ideas on various sectors such as public finance, debt sustainability, stability of the banking sector and the social security network. The Finance Minister of India, Nirmala Sitharaman, has assured Sri Lanka of her fullest support and cooperation for its recovery from the ongoing economic crisis. Sitharaman conveyed the assurance to the Sri Lankan High Commissioner, Milinda Moragada, when the envoy met her on Monday. The Finance Minister of India assured the High Commissioner of her fullest support and cooperation to the process of economic recovery in Sri Lanka, the Indian High Commission said in a statement. This news broadcast comes to you from the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. The Minister of Labour and Foreign Employment, Manusha Nanayakara, said a proposal will be submitted to the Cabinet to grant a vehicle import permit for Sri Lankan migrant workers who carry our remittances through legal channels. He said Sri Lankan migrant workers who use legal channels for remittances will be given a permit to import electric vehicles. Stating that the import of vehicles has been suspended by the government, Minister Nanayakara said, however, permits will be granted only for Sri Lankan migrant workers who use the official banking channels for sending foreign currency. Measures will be taken to enable the electric vehicles that will be imported to be charged via solar power, he said. The minister also said that a low-interest housing loan scheme will be introduced for the Sri Lankan migrant workers. The Thailand government has donated 10,000 ego vaccines for the benefit of kidney patients in Sri Lanka. The ambassador of Thailand, Pop Anpol, handed over the stocks to the Director General of Health Services, Dr. Asela Gunawardena, yesterday. This will be distributed to the government hospitals in island-wide locations. And that concludes local news.
The main news story is brought to you by Siddhalepa Vedamahatmya.
Several persons have been remanded until the 1st of July by the Fort Magistrate over violent incidents that were reported during protests in front of the Education Ministry and the police headquarters. The protests had been staged on the 9th and 10th of June against the government and the Sri Lanka police. The police said the 10 suspects who were wanted in connection to the violent incidents have been arrested after they surrendered to the Maradana police yesterday and came to you in the main news story.
The main news story was brought to you by Siddhalepa Vedamahatmya.
Moving on to Watchlight, dengue fever is on the rise due to the onset of the monsoon rains. The most number of dengue patients have been detected in the western province. The Colombo and Gampaha districts have shown many patients identified in the recent past. The health authorities requested residents of Colombo and the suburbs to keep their home front clean. The schools of the western province are also advised to keep their premises clean. The health authorities are expected to make an inspection visit to these sites in the near future, and that came to you in Watchlight. On to a bulletin of world news making headlines this morning. The Taliban appeal for international aid after deadly quake. EU leaders to back Ukraine as candidate at Brussels summit. And the Saudi Crown Prince visits Turkey for the first time since the Khashoggi murder. The Taliban in Afghanistan have appealed for international support as the country deals with the aftermath of a devastating 6.1 magnitude earthquake. More than 1,000 people have died and at least 1,500 were injured, a local official said. Paktika province in the southeast has been the most affected. The UN is scrambling to provide emergency shelter and food aid. The rescue efforts are being hampered by heavy rain and hail. The deadliest earthquake to strike the country in 2 decades is a major challenge for the Taliban, the Islamist movement which regained power last year after the Western-backed government collapsed. The earthquake struck around 27 miles from the city of Khost, and tremors were felt as far away as Pakistan and India. Witnesses reported feeling the quake in both Afghanistan's capital Kabul and Pakistan's capital Islamabad. Ukraine is set to be approved as an EU candidate at a Brussels summit on Thursday after the European Commission gave the green light. Ukraine applied days after the Russian invasion in February, and the process has since moved at a record speed. Its ambassador to the EU told the BBC it would be a psychological boost for Ukrainians. But Chenstov admitted real integration could only start when the war was over. Candidate status is the first official step towards EU membership, and France said this week there was a total consensus on Ukraine, but it can take many years to join, and there's no guarantee of success. Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince has visited Turkey for the first time since the 2018 murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi in its Istanbul consulate. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan embraced Mohammed bin Salman before they held talks aimed at repairing a deep rift. Mr. Erdogan once indirectly accused the prince of ordering Saudi agents to kill Khashoggi. He denied any involvement. Turkey is currently seeking trade, investment and assistance to help it deal with a worsening economic crisis. It has also worked to improve relations with the United Arab Emirates, Egypt and Israel after years of tensions. Following their talks, a joint statement said the two men discussed improving relations and investment in sectors from energy to defense, amongst others. Back to the headlines of the world news. The Taliban appeal for international aid after deadly quake. EU leaders to back Ukraine as candidate at Brussels summit. And the Saudi Crown Prince visits Turkey for the first time since the Khashoggi murder. That concludes this bulletin of world news, and taking a look at development news. The Cabinet of Ministers approved the proposal made by the Environment Minister Ahmad Nazir to implement the updated National Environment Policy. Core Cabinet spokesman Mahinda Amravira said that the Environment Ministry has taken measures to update the National Environmental Policy and strategies published in 2003 with the advice of environmental experts and stakeholders as well as the views of the public. And that's development news.
Sports News is brought to you by
Sampath Bank. We present your future.
Jason Roy hammered 101 off 86 deliveries, and stand-in skipper Jos Buttler blasted 86 off 64 to help England clinch a comfortable 8-wicket victory over the Netherlands and seal an emphatic 3-0 one-day international series win. Buttler deputised for injured captain Ian Morgan, who was suffering with a groin injury, and saw the Dutch dismissed for 244 as Scott Edwards' 64 top-scored. David Willey finished a pick off the attack with 4 for 36 before England made light of the total in 30.1 overs as Buttler and Roy guided them home with unbeaten knocks. This was the 9th time Buttler has skippered England in ODIs, and his record reads 1-6, lost 3. And well, that's sports news, and we take a look at business news next.
Cash through NSP globally and win wonderful gifts locally. From October 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2022. Remit a minimum of $100 or an equivalent amount in any foreign currency 3 times through NSB U Trust.
Business News, sponsored by National Savings Bank, the safest place for your money.
Twitter is trailing a new feature allowing users to share notes as long as 2,500 words. The social media platform normally limits posts to 280 characters. Twitter said the move was a response to seeing people use the platform to post pictures of longer announcements and steer followers to outside newsletters. The test will run for 2 months and involve a small group of writers in Canada, Ghana, the UK and the US. The new feature aims to keep audiences in the Twitter ecosystem, with readers able to see a headline and access the longer note by clicking on a link. That's business news. We look at economic news next.
Business News, sponsored by
Cash through NSP globally and win wonderful gifts locally. Will you be the lucky winner of the NSP Golden Jubilee? 50 gold sovereigns for the top prize winner of the NSP Golden Jubilee. Scooters for the 10 second prize winners. iPhones for the 10 third prize winners. Mountain bikes for the 29 fourth prize winners. From October 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2022. Remit a minimum of $100 or an equivalent amount in any foreign currency 3 times through NSB U Trust.
In economic news, prices in the UK are continuing to rise at their fastest rate for 40 years, with food costs, particularly for bread, cereal and meat, climbing. The Office for National Statistics said the UK inflation, the rate at which prices rise, edged up to 9.1% in the 12 months to May, from 9% in April. Fuel and energy prices are the biggest drivers of inflation, but the ONS said food costs had pushed it up further. Workers and unions are pushing for pay rises to cope with higher prices, but the government has warned against employees handing out big increases in salaries over fears of a 1970s style of inflationary spiral, where firms hike wages and then pass the cost on to customers through higher prices. That's economic news, and to conclude the weather report, several spells of showers occur in the western, Sabragamo and northwestern provinces, and in the Kandy, Nuwara, Galle and Matara districts. Showers or thundershowers occur at a few places in the Uva and eastern provinces during the afternoon or night. To conclude this bulletin of news, a recap of the headlines. The Prime Minister calls on all parties to come together to ensure the country's recovery. An accelerated program has been implemented to solve the domestic gas problem. An interim budget for the year 2022 will be tabled in Parliament this August. Sri Lanka to organise credit aid conference with 3 main lending countries. India's finance minister assures fullest support for Sri Lanka's economic recovery. An electric vehicle import permit scheme for Sri Lankan foreign workers. And the Taliban appeals for international aid after deadly quake. That concludes this morning's news broadcast.